Hello and welcome back to the Run Lift It Evolve podcast. In this episode, we have a special guest, Adam Kent. Hello, mate. You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good, mate. Good. So, in this special guest episode, we're going to talk about amateur rugby and returning to sport in 2021. So, a quick intro to Adam. So, I actually met Adam in 2012, about November 2012, wasn't it? That's
Yeah, a
when you
long time
joined
ago.
Virgin. Yeah, a long time ago. So, we worked together in Virgin Active, and then we played rugby together, and we've been kind of mates ever
Air
since.
quotes.
Air quotes for mates, but yeah. So I met Adam in November 2012 at Virgin Active, and
Hmm.
Adam's still in Virgin Active. He's been there for 8 years now. Two
Yep.
years into his personal training career at Virgin Active, he qualified for their master trainer position, which is seen as their top tier trainer. And you've been
Hmm.
a top tier trainer at Virgin for 6 years now, haven't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you moved from Clapham to Notting Hill and took over their project there, and now you're currently as a master trainer at Clapham Common in Clapham Old Town.
That's the one. Yep.
Yeah, that's the one. Cool. In Adam's sporting career, he done bodybuilding. Well,
Hmm.
competed at bodybuilding for about two
Yeah, I
years.
did
Is
about
it
two.
seasons or is it just years?
Yeah, two
Yeah.
two seasons really. So like, I took a bit of time out from playing rugby to pursue sort of like an amateur bodybuilding career. Did quite well.
Yeah.
Was successful enough to place.
Yeah, you placed a few times. You got the pictures,
Yeah,
and
I got
then
the pictures, man. I've been living on them since.
yeah, they go on the wall, and then you go back to doing the things you love. But yeah, so after 2 years of bodybuilding, you got back into rugby, and you've been doing rugby ever since for Ironsides.
Yep. That's it. Back
And
to
that's
on
been about back to Ironsides. That's 7 seasons now, right? Roughly,
Yeah, it's been a
including
while that as well.
including the best season, the 2015-16 season where we won the league.
Oh, of course. How could you
Yeah,
forget?
the highlight.
I still got the shirt from that season
Anyway,
as well. Buried
I
deep
tell
in the
everybody
cupboard.
about that season. It's the first thing I normally tell people as soon as I meet someone new about the league winning season. Okay, so the point of today, Adam, and the reason I got
Mm.
you on is because I've done a few episodes about training, about nutrition, about lifestyle. I had
Yep.
Sam on a few weeks ago talking about indoor cycling, 'cause that's coming up right
Yeah, that was
now.
a great episode.
Matty on last week.
Hmm.
Matty last week talking about training at home and adapting to home and the stresses at home.
Yeah, I
But I
really
think a very
enjoyed
important
that.
subject is like sport. Is sport.
Cool.
You know, sport's gone all over the place this year. So if we
Yeah,
look
in a big
back, I
way.
think if we reflect where amateur rugby is at the moment, and then
Mm.
we'll look at what's going to happen the rest of the year and the rest of the seasons going forward. So professional rugby come back live as usual, just behind closed doors at the beginning of the
Yeah.
season. But amateur rugby never restarted again, did it?
No, it was a bit of a weird one as well, because I remember as we were starting to ease the lockdown, and other sports were coming back into play. So I
Mm.
remember I was starting to get to grips with training uh, amateur football players, and
Yeah.
I at the time didn't quite really understand how certain sports were sort of coming back into the fold and being allowed to open play, where it
Mm.
kind of felt like, yes, rugby itself is a very physical and like a lot of contact that happens in that, and a lot of prolonged contact happens in that sport. But still, you kind of think with things like football and hockey, there's still a lot of contact collisions and things like that. So I never again understood the science behind it. I'm
Yeah.
not an expert when it comes to these things, so I have to obviously trust the experts
Yeah.
when it comes to
Probably,
it.
probably
But
some of the heavy breathing on each other within a scrum, and
yeah, when you're all lying in a
and
pile, and then obviously back in
yeah,
showers afterwards.
and there's all that blood and sweat. I can imagine that's
Mm.
not the
Yeah, it's not
COVID
obviously the
friendly
most hygienic, and yeah, it's sports.
sports. Yeah, yeah. So amateur rugby never returned in September.
No.
Just professional did. So the clubs are trying to do training and keep the guys kind of together the best they can. I mean, from
Yeah.
the amateur point of view, another lockdown happened in November.
Mm.
Nothing happened in December, and then we went back into lockdown, and we've been locked down 10 weeks now. We've got another 6 left. In April, there's a return to sport, outdoor sport, but I think that's
Mm.
probably going to be tennis, golf, maybe the
Yeah.
odd football,
I
hockey,
didn't
and then
see much of rugby, and I feel that we're
nah,
still waiting actually to hear from the governing bodies about actually the dates for the return of amateur rugby.
yeah. highly likely though it's going to be September. So that just means
Mm.
for amateur players, they're going to have a year out of rugby, and then next season, the next time they're going to play is in September.
Yeah.
So I think, in some sports, some people that play in sport might be able to relate to this back to their sport, but if we're going to just focus on rugby a little bit. So let's look at where we are now
Mhm.
and look at the perfect plan between now and
Yeah.
September as if rugby was going to return, because I think you've got to be crazy not to think like that, especially
Mm.
if you've had a year out of playing rugby and rugby is your outlet, your go-to. Because in amateur rugby, not all the players are gym people, are they? Not a lot of them are. Like
Yeah.
Mick saying, a lot of them, just because of life and timings, they might only be able to do 2 rugby sessions a week
Mm.
at training, and then the game on a Saturday. That's normally their training week. So for those people, I feel they might have lost that amount of training, potentially 3 sessions a week,
Yeah.
and then they've had a bit longer of a break. So I think it would be good to talk and come up with a plan of what people
Mm.
could start thinking about and in the build up to next season.
Yeah, I think you're right with some of the things you just touched on there, because I think always the way to think about things is, you try and come up with solutions for things, but you also got to identify some of the problems that amateur players were
Yeah.
having, and one of the things that you were saying there was time constraints. So you can imagine that obviously everyone's holding down a job, and from what I
Hmm.
saw in the amateur side of rugby was that you definitely had a mixed bag of levels of fitness. So you had some people that were really keen on hitting the gym in between training sessions. For
Hmm.
most clubs, you're training like twice a week with the team. So you kind of like
Hmm.
your Monday Wednesdays or your Monday Thursdays or whatever, and you're maybe hitting some weights on the Tuesdays or Wednesday Thursdays, depending on how that sort of rotated over. And some people felt that just turning up for the training sessions was enough, and depending on
Hmm.
how sort of low level the amateur scene was, you might not even turned up for training. You might have just been hitting the gym by
Yeah.
yourself. So it's always funny going into clubs and speaking to other players and trying to figure out their level of fitness or their level of experience when it comes to training, because you'll have people that get their mind blown by the fact that you're telling them that they can avoid injury just by stretching. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, why? What are the benefits actually of training? And once you kind of get that down to some people really take to it. Some people shrug their shoulders and just say, yeah, I just don't have time to invest in myself like that. I'm only here
Hmm.
for the social side of rugby as well, so I'm not really
Yeah.
keen on becoming sort of an elite
But,
athlete.
but
So
with the social side of rugby, it does come
mm.
at a cost.
Oh yeah,
It's not
massively.
it, it's not just running around with some other blokes. You got
Mm.
people running at you, and if 2 people start running at each other, there's going to be a collision. And if you're not, and there's some injuries that cannot be helped, right? There's some like collision
Yeah.
injuries that just cannot be helped. But there's also some injuries where you're just not conditioned to play,
Mm.
almost as in you've not looked, the hamstring goes, you haven't got enough shoulder mobility, so it takes somebody
There
to,
is that.
you go to make a tackle and that arm's never gone back that far, and then it falls off
Well,
almost.
I feel
So
like a bit of a problem with that was that I was seeing, like, when I was speaking to a lot of these players, and even to myself to some degree, is that when you are trying to make headway and you are going into the gym, you're seeing a lot of players more focusing on sort of muscle building, like trying to put on mass, trying to
mhm,
become sort of big block rugby players, and they're generally staying within those kind of rep ranges. They're generally hitting those more bodybuilding movements, so a lot more isolated work. Sort of they're
yeah,
definitely looking for hit the glamour muscles rather
yeah,
than
yeah, yeah,
focusing on functionality.
yeah,
Whereas, as you've just keyed in there, what average amateur players should really be focusing on is I think two things is cardiovascular work and injury prevention. And
mhm,
the cardiovascular work at our level of rugby, the fitter you are and the more engine you've got, the longer you can last, the genuine, like, most of the time win you the games, because you can stay, you're faster, you're a lot more coordinated and aware, rather when obviously you're thinking in your head and you're breathing heavy and you're just gassed and you're not making it halfway around the pitch because you're just knackered.
Yeah.
That loses you the game most of the time, because you're just not in the right place at the right time. You're not setting up well.
Yeah, in a game where you're very much trying to find space, right?
Yeah.
The player that can get there and block that hole, that space is gone. If you're not getting up and moving into that hole, the space is there, people run through, and that's how you lose the game.
No matter what your size is, whether you're a fullback or you're a prop, if you work on your cardio and your engine and your endurance, you will be a better rugby player, more than like putting on any mass on terms of your shoulders and your arms or your legs or anything like that. They might help in scenarios, but in the overall game, cardio wins. But with that, on the other side of things, is the injury prevention. So obviously the more mobile and flexible you are, more range of movement that your body's capable of doing, so you actually will increase performance. So if you've got really tight hamstrings, tight hip flexors, you've got dodgy lower backs, you're not going to be able to lift your knees as well, you're definitely not going to be able to land as well, your stride and your gait will be massively affected. But with that as well, there's nothing worse than having that in the back of your mind when you're playing, that you've got some tightnesses or these little niggles that are going on in your body. And it does plague you a little bit. It makes you think a little bit more about some of the decisions that you're making on the pitch. You're like, am I going to tackle this guy because my shoulder's messed up? You know what I mean? And I've seen a lot of players kind of, freak out a little bit. They kind of have that hesitation when it comes to doing certain things on the pitch, because they're having this mental image in their head, like, oh, I've just come back from a knee injury. The last thing I want to do now is get chop tackle. I don't want to hit that ruck now because I've got a fear that there's going to be some repercussion to it. So, those are definitely those two areas, that injury prevention and cardio.
Okay, well let's look at the situation when they're in. So gyms are not open.
No.
Everyone's flipped to home training. Especially you. You're at home. I know you don't.
I am at home.
With your living situation, you can't fit a whole gym in your living room. I know you've got a few dumbbells and some bands. So let's talk about your training, and then I think that'd be a good place to go. Is your training, what your plan is for the next 5 months, or what you have been doing, what you're going to do going forward, and then what other people can do. I think that'd be a good way to go.
Yeah, I feel that I've come into some potential problems myself, and I'm starting to think ahead when I come back into the gym. And one of the things is that I've been obviously really inactive. I've not been able to really sort of push or test myself. One of the things I obviously really like about playing rugby is that all the hard work that you put in through training, you get to test that out. You get to almost assess yourself on the pitch about how fit you are and how dominant you can be against other people. I'm massively out of routine, you know what I mean? So I've got a routine, so I wake up, I go for a run, and that's it. You know what I mean? There's not much more else I can do when I'm furloughed. And then I think looking back on when we first came back to the gyms after a lockdown, it's the expectations I had of where I would be in the gym. So one thing I was actually quite surprised at was that my strength didn't go as much as I thought it was, as thought it had been. I was at a kind of a moderate level of strength from where I was. But the thing I noticed the most was my endurance just wiped, and I could not do big long gym sessions like I used to. I definitely didn't. I lost a bit of speed and pace. I wasn't as explosive. And again, I am getting older, and those things are to be expected. But when you notice a dramatic degrade like that, it can be slightly demoralising. It's like thinking, right, how am I going to get back into where I was? And even when you do that, it's like, well, I'm only trying to get back to, a level where I was previously. That's step A, and then to try and go and improve or maintain that is, step B. So I felt that.
I think everybody had that going back into the gyms for the first time after taking a break off. like when you first went back to gym, I remember the one exercise I couldn't do throughout
Mm.
lockdown was pull-ups, and I
Yeah,
went to do like a set of six pull-ups the first day back at the gym. I've been locked down for 6 months, and I was like, okay, come on in, let's do 3 sets of six. Did my
mm.
first six. I was like, well, that didn't feel good, and then I was like, come on, Dale, you're doing these 3 sets of six. This used to be your thing. Yeah, you can hand in your PT badge if you cannot do 3 sets of 6. And then for the week, I couldn't move. Literally,
Yeah,
I could
that
not move.
there was something that I really did enjoy about that though was the DOMs. You know what I mean? Because you're obviously so used to a routine and a certain style of movements that
Yeah,
you don't get. So going back to the gym was actually quite a nice feeling of going, oh, feeling quite sore in a few areas.
yeah, yeah,
I remember sending you some videos as well. You know, like kind of my sort of progress back into things. It
yeah,
was
yeah,
that
yeah.
it was that even the simple things like the warm ups as well. Like my general warm up in the gym is I'd go for sort of like 12 15 minutes of some sort of steady state just to make sure I'm sweating, go do a load of mobility, use some band work to do a bit of
Hmm.
core. So generally my warm ups take around about sort of 20 25 minutes. I know that's a long time for some people, but I always need to make sure that I'm just staying on top of my body. And then I
Hmm.
would go and do some compound movements, and then I might do a little bit of like explosive work and things like that. And the warm up was hard. Like I generally try to do about 100 lunges in my warm ups. I think I remember getting
Yeah,
to about 30, 40 and just cramping up, and then just being like,
yeah.
"Oh Jesus, this is going to be a long day," and then and that's the thing, isn't it? As I was saying about the expectations, is going back into the gym and really reducing the workload and getting comfortable again with I'd say
Well,
extreme
before we go on to
movements.
that, mate.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, before we go on to that, let's quickly talk about the last like we're in March now, the last 2 months of this lockdown, starting 2021. What you kind of been up to, and
Yeah,
then we'll go back to what to do when the gym's open. So you've been focusing quite a lot
yeah.
on
It's
like you're running. You said like 3K, 5Ks have been your thing for a while, haven't they?
yeah. I'm just trying to stay and just maintain a level of cardio. A great
Hmm.
excuse just to get out of the house, get a little bit of sunshine.
Yeah.
Obviously, the weather's improved a lot over the last couple of weeks. And running in the winter time was a bit sketchy at times. There were a few times I went out and I was
Yeah.
slipping and sliding on the ice and I couldn't see. So it's quite nice to actually not have to worry about that stuff now. And
Yeah.
again one of the issues that I'm thinking about with this is that I am going for runs and I'm going for my usual routes and things like that. I'll go through a few laps around the Emirates Stadium. I live up in Finsbury Park, so it's really easy
Yeah.
to get to. And but I'm moving in very linear directions. I'm not doing any kind of
Hmm.
multi-directional work. I mean, this is of course I could do it. I mean, I could
Hmm.
go out and have like a whole session to myself. But I feel like I get very limited with things like space. I mean, my flat's great, but it's definitely not got room for doing a lot of the movements that I'd love to do or things that I'm very used to doing in the gym.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't have a barbell or have a set of weights. Yeah, I can obviously tinker with some of the movements, but I
Yeah.
feel that when you're so used to way and style of training, it's very hard to sometimes adapt and break out of things that you like doing. You know what I mean? I feel like not enough people talk about that when it comes to exercise. Is that I like exercising and I like the movements I do, and I'm very much a stickler for these things, for these routines.
Yeah.
I don't like change. Um, and so now it's like I'm at home. I've got a pair of
So
dumbbells.
2020 was a good year for you then.
Oh, definitely not. No. And
No.
then to now just kind of go right. Okay. Well, what's the thing that I can do? I don't enjoy working out at home. I feel very limited
Yeah.
by what I can do. Cool. I'm just going to maintain. I'm going to try and maintain a level of fitness, a level of cardio. I'm going to do some really basic
Yeah.
body weight movements. I'm not going to push the boat out because I know I'm not going to come out of this mega fit. You know what I mean? I'm not going to come out rocking the prison look, like I'm sure a lot of people had in their mind when they're like, right, I've got all the time in the world now, I can work out
Yeah.
at home every day. It just doesn't work like that for some people, and it definitely doesn't work like that for me. My body doesn't react as well as it does to. It needs a lot of heavy stimulation, and as much as body weight can get you there and get you really fit and build up lots of endurance and things like that. It's just not the style or training that I
That you enjoy.
enjoy. You know what I mean?
So, so with that, so we've got another. So we're in March now. We've got another month of
Mm.
this lockdown, 5 6 weeks or so.
Yep.
Then the gyms start opening. So then that's going to be April. So we've got April, May, June, July, August, and then September. The season starts.
Yeah.
August is going to be very much hopefully back to playing touch, like touch
Oh
rugby,
yes. Gassy touch.
and then yeah, and then rugby training will start, and Gassy touch will start,
Mhm.
and that'll be kind of the pre-season. So let's April, May, June, July. So 4 months.
Mm.
What would you kind of say you need to focus on, and what would you kind of think um,
Yeah.
a snapshot of the overall rugby player and the amateur rugby club should be doing?
So if I was to say, kind of come up with some recommendations
Hmm.
for anybody listening to this who's getting back in the gym, not just for rugby players, but just anyone that is playing the sports or just wanting to sort of improve their fitness from where they are at now, is when you do get back in the gym, obviously, as we've spoken about, um, sort of minimalising expectations, it's kind of taking this approach which is called the 80-20 approach,
Hmm.
whereas generally
Yeah.
most of your workout is easy for 80% of it, and you're kind of trying to work at a very sort of very low intensity, and then having some high intensity either at like the beginning or the end of that session, or you're kind of thinking it more of a larger sort of group, like a macro sense of your training, like in
Hmm.
terms of your weekly training. 80% of the sessions in that week are going to be sort of very low intensity. So for example, my training was always hit it hard on Monday, do all my big compounds, and then I would generally do a lot more functional and lighter work and cardio throughout the week. And that was always in the idea that I was building towards game days. The last thing I want to be doing is hitting like a
Hmm.
heavy squat and deadlift session on Friday, and then going in and trying
Yeah.
to play on Saturday. Uh,
Going into the game you want to perform in fatigued.
yeah, so this is so I'd
Yeah, which
it
is
almost like pyramid in a way my week, in a sense. It's
yeah,
like I would have like hit it hard Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that kind of
yeah.
block there, and then do any kind of maintenance work for Thursday,
Maintenance
Friday.
movement. Yeah.
I think the other thing is like focusing up on cleaning up on my diet, sleeping patterns, and things like that. I can imagine that being sat at home at if you're desk based, but you're working remotely at home, your diet might have improved. Some people have gone the other way. Some people are
Hmm.
drinking less because the pubs aren't open. Some people are drinking more because they've just got nothing else to
Or
do.
yeah.
With that, yes, when people say to yourself, like, everyone always quotes these kind of percentages and things like that. It's like, oh, fitness is 80% of, 8% diet and things like that. I always find that such a
Hmm.
strange term or phrase, because it's like
Yeah.
fitness is,
I've never used that.
yeah, I don't really get, or because I hear that so often when people say, when they're talking about diets and things like that, and said, oh, it's fitness is 8% diet, and it's like, well, what what value are you measuring with that? You determine that
Yeah.
fitness is a unit of measure. I don't understand that. So I've always approached it in separate values, in a sense. It's like that you train well and you eat well, and so I would have to be thinking, right, well, when I'm cleaning up my diet, I'm kind of thinking as well, like cutting out things like excess sugars. I've been very
Hmm.
guilty of that. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I've not having to worry so much about the level of macros I'm putting into my body. I'm not tracking anything at the moment because I'm not building muscle to that extent. I'm having
Hmm.
a protein shake and eating regular amounts. I feel that obviously lockdown's just been so disruptive to that, because especially at the start of the lockdowns, when supermarkets were getting cleared out, and you were going in and having a little bit of a forage and going like, oh my god, like all the good stuff's gone, and I'm gonna have to
Rice
go
and beans
veggie and
again.
get yeah, exactly. I'm gonna have to get the tins of chickpeas out and stuff like that. So I've yeah, it's a hard one because it's like you just don't know until you get back into the gym and you test out and you find out where you're going to be. So I feel like the major one for most people is going to be setting the goals for yourself personally and being thinking about what is it that I want to do when I get back in the gym. Right, I want to get fit and ready for pre-season. That's the big thing. It's not getting ready for the season. It's getting fit and ready for pre-season. You know what I mean? 'Cause nobody likes going to pre-season and getting their ass kicked and going, Jesus Christ, I'm really out of shape. It's like you kind of want to be fit for pre-season and then use pre-season as a way of really taking you upwards, so that you are fittest that you can be, and then obviously, as I said, like fit as possible, so you're avoiding injury. My personal
and you should
goals.
be going to pre-season really to.
Yeah, of course.
So you should be really going to pre-season to kind of, get back into playing rugby again and playing like with the team and learning how to tackle again and getting that sort of thing. Not building base fitness, not building basic fitness. What could have been done before. You shouldn't be going into there worrying about fitness. You should be worrying about team plays and like your position and your new role in the team and what you're going to do.
Yeah.
So with that, I just want to just looking at time. I just want to build on like really kind of narrow that down. Because we talked just before this, we got on about the prioritizing mobility, acceleration, core strength, and then kind of a bit of lactic acid training.
Yeah.
So let's just jump into those bits because one with mobility, I always bang on about mobility.
I do like your mobility.
Because I think this, because you've got to look after yourself. And I said it in a few episodes back. I feel everyone has a blagging age where you just get away with anything.
Yeah,
you
it
can
catches
absolutely,
up with you, mate.
Yeah, you can treat your body like absolute turd. You don't look after yourself, drink, go out, train, not recover, not stretch. You get away with that for a bit, and we all like to do that. But at the end of the day, your body's going to catch up with you. You have a blagging age. Once you pass that blagging age, you don't get injured because you get older. You get injured because you're not looking after yourself.
Yeah.
So mobility is a big thing for me. So yeah, and then we're going to talk about kind of a quick bit about acceleration, core work, and lactic acid training in these build-up months to pre-season.
So just kind of like, well, maybe working backwards on what you just said there. So the lactic acid training, it was always my favourite style of cardio when it came to training for rugby. And the reason why I like that style of training, it's hard, it feels hard. It builds up a lot of endurance. It's really good at burning fat, and it's so simple. It's a lot of my training revolved around just doing intervals of 400 to 800 meter dashes. And when it came to the resistance side of things, doing weight training, you can still do a form of lactic acid training, which was doing lots of giant sets. So, doing like kind of 4 big movements and having very, very little rest in between. So I used to do a lot of that with like kettlebells and do a lot more kind of like functional big compound movements and things like that. And so what I used to do lactic acid training was I'd either go for the 400 meter kind of dashes. I'd go for 800 meter dashes on treadmills. If you ever run 800 meters, I used to do track and field back at high school. I used to do hurdles, 400 and 800. 800 always used to hate because the hardest one is that you can't sprint it, you can't run it, like you can't like go, you have to actually pace yourself with it. And I like that feeling. I like that.
You get over a hurdle at the moment, mate.
Oh, definitely not now. Barely lifting my legs off the ground these days, mate. So with that, that would definitely then help me hopefully build up aid endurance, but get my body moving. I do a lot of stuff on the watt bike as well, so that would be actually the smaller intervals. So I would do like the more the 400 kind of stuff on there, just those those almost like 20-30 second bursts, like just try and go as quick as you can. And trying to replicate that style of play on the rugby pitch in the gym, And I always feel that's the stuff that kind of gets a bit looked over sometimes when you kind of start thinking about your training. It's like, right, when it comes to I want to build up my core strength, it's like, well, why am I building up my core strength? What do I use my core in when I'm playing rugby? Well, for me, in the type 5, it's like, well, I've obviously got to try and hold myself well. I've got to be able to hold a rigid body so that people can drive from behind me and I can drive well and hold that very fixed position. And obviously to make sure it's as safe for me as well as everybody else. So I used to train a lot of kind of plank movements. I would try and obviously do some destabilize myself when I was doing that. I would do a lot of grip work as well. I feel grip work is a part of core. I know a lot of people will argue about that. What is core? But I always used to define it as anywhere that muscle meets bone. Building up that strength. So anything that I can grab onto. So I used to do a lot of hangs when it comes to core work. So doing hanging leg raises. I used to try and also use different fabrics as well. So I used to use towels as well to grab onto when I'm trying to do pull-ups and hold onto the bars, just to almost replicate holding onto jerseys and things like that. And with that, probably the other thing that I would say that I'd, kind of what you mentioned there is acceleration. So I'd be looking at doing lots of explosive work, lots of band work. So I'd be, taping up bands onto weights, doing squat jumps with a barbell. I would also do the band around the bar on your back when you're doing the bench press, trying to be really explosive with the bench press, just trying to create what I would think in my head like an overall general athlete, how they would train, but then try and tinker and tailor it towards rugby in the sense okay, well, how do I strengthen my body for tackling? How do I strengthen my body for sidestepping? And obviously me, when I play, sidestepping is not really my vocabulary.
Oh, that's what you call it. I was wondering what you was doing on the field.
No, I just straight, I go straight. That's straight, what I do.
Straight and true.
Into people.
Straight and true. Okay, cool. Wait. So just to kind of wrap things up. So I think kind of key messages from this podcast is, we do have a time frame. You've got to build a plan around the season starting in September, pre-season starting in August, and go into August rugby ready to then start pre-season. And between that time, with even if you're just at home or getting back into the gym, it's about building up kind of the base, like a foundation will be the priority.
Yeah.
Focusing on any niggles and injuries that you've picked up before. Then, so it's either managing previous injuries and then start thinking about injury prevention. You know your body, you know what's broken, you know what doesn't move, that should move. Fix those sort of things. And then start getting some rugby specific conditioning drills in. Will be kind of the three main focus points going forward, I'd say.
So listen, watching your Instagram videos on mobility, definitely a key one for everyone. Very, very helpful.
There we go. Good.
Throwing in a lot of movements myself.
Yeah, good man. Good. Have you got anything rugby related to add now, or I think we've covered quite a bit there?
Well, let's not get started what happened over the weekend, mate. That's don't want to talk about any Six Nations.
Yeah.
Okay, it'd be some.
I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah. If I brought that up right now, mate, I think that'll sink this podcast, or make it. I don't know. Okay, good. So one random point is talking of podcasts. You have a podcast.
I do, very much removed from the world of fitness.
Tell me about that.
So my podcast,
You've got 30 seconds to promote your podcast.
All right, okay. So I run a podcast with a good friend of mine, Craig, who you know as well through playing rugby. He is a very well accomplished screenwriter, and I very, very many years ago went to university and did a film studies degree, which I kind of use as some sort of basis to say that I'm an expert in film, which obviously I'm not. And we just talk shop about movies that we like, very much nostalgia field, because we seem to be stuck in the 90s when it comes to picking movies. I know that you really like some of the movies. Which, was it Deep Blue Sea that
Starship
you're a big
Troopers
fan
was a
of?
good episode. Starship Troopers was my favourite episode.
Oh,
that
yeah,
guys
you could
did.
be a bit more enthusiastic about that, Dale.
I liked it. It was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, good. And then so we release a podcast every Tuesday. So if you want to check out Adam and Craig's Guilty Pleasure Cinema, we're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that jazz. But you can mainly find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
I'll put those links in the bio below.
Oh, cheers, Dale. Much appreciated.
Because I'm a good egg. Good. Okay, great. Well, thanks for coming on, Adam. That's all very useful, and I hope everyone who listened found that useful. And if you've got any questions for me or Adam, just leave them in the comments, reach out to me, and then we'll get back to you. But yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks again, Adam.
No worries, mate. Thanks for having me.